The biggest problem I have with the superhero movie genre is how it often handles the superpowers themselves. You've spent millions of dollars on the rights to all these colorful characters, and the most many of these movies can muster when it comes to the final fight is mindless punching. Almost all of these cases can be broken down into two problems that work in tandem: mirror matches and ill-defined weaknesses. Mirror matches are where the hero and villain have similar if not identical power sets. This is often done to maintain focus on the protagonist. Now, I'm not the first person to point out that Marvel villains are kind of the cinematic equivalent of white bread, but it bears repeating. You need time to develop how these powers work, and time is not something given to these forgotten foes. This makes the idea of giving them abilities outside of the super strength, super healing wombo combo, or literally the same powers as the hero, near impossible. A lot of people would like to give Superman a hard time, but at least his movies attempt to establish an Achilles heel. What does the Hulk have? Sure, you could argue his strength is dependent on endurance, which would totally work if it weren't literally the weakness of every one of the Avengers. I get it, the point of these movies is to watch a bunch of badasses do awesome things, but even badasses have off days. If I don't have a weakness or a baseline for the powers that I can refer back to, then it's really hard to drive up tension outside of, oh no, he's tired. I love this genre, but when our heroes are so powerful that they can shred through normies faster than a 4chan thread, then I fail to see why I should be on the edge of my seat. That's why I find My Hero Academia so remarkable. It conquers each of these challenges with effortless imagination. Being outside of Disney's all-encompassing empire, it's free to lend a new perspective on superhero media at large without being an out-and-out parody. Take the character All Might. All Might doesn't have a secret identity to protect his family or friends, but because decades of crime fighting has left him weakened. He's Superman, but only for 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, he's nothing more than a Jimmy Olsen. Oh, my condolences, DC fans. This makes time a valuable resource in fight scenes, and keeps All Might from becoming a get-out-of-jail-free card. Then there's the source of his power, One for All, a superpower passed down from teacher to student. This gives a narrative reason for why a 14-year-old kid tags along with him on dangerous missions. And speaking of superpowers, let's talk about Ida. Sure, it's dorky that his superpower is engines sticking out of his calves, but this also puts a tangible lid on unimaginable power. If they just told you his quirk was super speed, then you may expect him to quicksilver his way out of situations, as is typical for speedsters to do. But because they specifically call his quirk engine, the story can effortlessly imply a number of things about his powers. Firstly, you understand that he can win the Indy 500, but not outrun light itself. Secondly, almost everyone understands that engines can overheat, or worse, burn out, instantly telling you he has an endurance limit. Lastly, because of the Fast and the Furious movies, most people know what nitro is, meaning it's perfectly reasonable for the story to expect you to believe that he has something similar that he can use in short bursts. There's also the hero Eraserhead, who can nullify anyone's abilities with a stare. Notice how they didn't go the X-Men Last Stand route and make his superpower nullification in Aura. By tying his ability to eyesight, we know that he can only stare down villains one at a time, meaning he can easily be overwhelmed. We also know that no matter how many staring contests he's won, he has to blink eventually, putting a biological ticking clock on his fight scenes. Not to mention his entire power set is a pretty great meta-gag, as he's the stoic teacher who's constantly shooting his students the evil eye. What's impressive is that Eraserhead isn't the only character where their superpowers are used as shorthand. Ida, the human engine, runs his life like a well-oiled machine. Ochako can manipulate gravity, reflecting her light and bubbly personality. Manita is smarmy and perverted, so his quirk is sticky and weird. Bakugo is impulsive to the point of being unstable, so of course he can freaking sweat nitroglycerin. And who could forget Todoroki, who can manipulate both fire and ice. The inherent contradiction in his power sets shows a deep internal conflict and foreshadows his troubled upbringing. I mean, his father forced a woman into marriage so his offspring would have superior genes. This idea directly confronts the uncomfortable implications of the superpowers as evolution angle popularly seen in X-Men. And this isn't the only place where My Hero Academia examines the gross implications of superhero conventions. I don't want to get off topic and spoil an entirely different show, but in the first season of Heroes, there's a deeply tragic villain that the show expects you to believe can be redeemed. However, his power is to emit limitless radiation at will. Sorry, but I just couldn't believe that this one-man Chernobyl could ever be a hero. My Hero Academia confronts this idea with the character of Shinzo. Shinzo's quirk is that he can brainwash anyone with a single word. His classmates fear him, and what little friends he has expect him to become a supervillain. However, Shinzo aspires to be a hero. He redoubles his training efforts after his defeat at the tournament, and he shows that he has a willingness to forge his own path. This paints a fantastic metaphor for overcoming societal expectations in less than a single episode. Because of My Hero Academia's efficiency when it comes to establishing character and abilities, it can spend much more time creating clever matchups for the characters themselves. Part of the joy of watching a fight scene in the show is seeing how the characters discover new synergies or uses for their abilities, something that can only really happen if your superpowers work off a consistent internal logic. This is the reason why it managed to make a freaking tournament arc one of the highlights of the show. Because each hero and villain has tangible strengths and weaknesses, the fights themselves end up feeling more like a sporting event anyway. Characters adopt the strategies and techniques of other heroes, and they often spend much of their fights getting to know their opponent, discovering their weak points, their nervous tics, and how to exploit them, much like a wrestling match or a fencing bout. A big reason why the fight against hero killer Stain is so engaging is the fact that we're left in the dark about what his superpowers actually are. This means the heroes had to figure out what their opponent's abilities were on the fly and piece together a strategy to combat it. Because these superpowers are emblematic of those wielding them, their weaknesses can become symbols of internal conflict. One for All is symbolic of Midoriya's inner strength. However, this ability is so powerful that to truly use it means breaking his own limbs. This reveals the unhealthy side of Midoriya's work ethic, how he's willing to risk his own health to achieve his goals. Bakugo's explosive quirk is flashy, but it's also destructive and really hard to use effectively, reflecting his headstrong personality. I could list more, but I might as well use the example everyone knows. The fight between Midoriya and Todoroki is a masterclass in the use of superpowers as internal metaphor. Todoroki's fire abilities remind him of his abusive father, so he's vowed to never use them. But because he's focused on ice manipulation to the exclusion of all else, he's become extremely unbalanced. He's cold and distant, lashing out when the metaphorical fire within becomes too great to suppress. This is evident in his brute force fighting style. And what's crazy is that Midoriya is willing to risk life and limb to get Todoroki to use his fire abilities. Because this fight isn't about trying to get Todoroki to unlock Super Saiyan 27 or something like that. It's about making him a whole person again. My Hero Academia reveals the true potential of the superhero genre. It uses overblown action sequences as an excuse to question the very nature of the human soul. It uses tired cliches as a vehicle for social commentary. It shows that superheroes can stay weird, relevant, and entertaining without being reduced to mindless punching. It reminds us that supervillains can be at once genuinely hateable and utterly compelling without sacrificing the complexity of the heroes. So while I may be anxiously waiting to see if Avengers Infinity War can manage anything as dynamic as a decade-old train fight, I can at least rest assured that Marvel outsiders like One Punch Man and My Hero Academia can keep things strange and inventive. That is, if One Punch Man Season 2 ever comes out. Come on, guys.